Hi, my name is Trevor Donnie. I run product marketing for Exabeam. I'm excited to be here today. Look forward to talking to you about my topic as part of the Masters of Product Marketing series here. And we're going to talk about a practical guide to building and using buyer personas. But before we get going, let me tell you a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I currently work at Exabeam. We are the Smarter SIM company. So I work in cybersecurity. We sell primarily to enterprises, so a B2B organization. I've previously run enterprise product marketing for Symantec, McAfee, and Ping Identity. Most of my career has been in cybersecurity. I was also the head of marketing at Verimatrix and Actians. So hoping to bring that broader experience to the conversation today. On a personal note, a little bit about myself, trying to get used to working from home here along with everyone else. I've undertaken to train for a half Ironman triathlon. It's going pretty well. Ran my first half marathon last week, and fingers crossed this event will actually happen. But, obviously a good chance it won't, and the training will have to be the goal unto itself, which hasn't been a bad thing to try and keep off the COVID-19 here and keep myself in some kind of shape over the course of this year working from home. Now let's get into the topic here. Hopefully it won't be a marathon of a presentation. The reason I wanted to speak on this topic was I think there's a couple challenges that I've seen myself and heard about through my peers when organizations undertake to do buyer persona programs. The first is that too often all the effort that goes into creating personas really just leads to some decorations, if you will, or some ornaments that the product marketing team uses to dress up its presentations or put posters up in the marketing section of their office. And they don't really get to being able to implement that program and have it make a material impact on how the company is going to market. And that's a real shame. So I wanted to provide some advice and some thoughts about how to make this real. Another project problem is that sometimes persona programs don't even get out of the gates. In fact, they get mired down in process. They get lost in the complexity of the effort to create these personas and obviously fail to deliver. So what I want to do today is to explain why the effort is worthwhile here, why personas can be your ticket to carving out a more strategic role for you and your PMM organization. I want to share a process that you can use to roll out a successful program. And then I want to share some examples of how my teams and I have used personas to impact go-to-market and decision-making of the organizations where we worked. So first off, why create buyer personas? The main reason that you'll hear people talk about is so that you as product marketers can become the voice of the customer. And for sure, this is a real benefit of doing a program like this. You really want to clearly understand what the buying process is that your customers are going through, who the different personas are, what roles do they take at different points in that process, and make sure that you have a good understanding of that. A second piece is to educate other go-to-market teams about what you've learned. Now, the rest of the marketing team is definitely your customer. Let's talk about demand gen, for example. If you go through and learn that your buyers are going to certain shows, whether they're trade shows or other kind of smaller events, maybe you learn that they read certain publications or they listen to particular industry analysts. You'll actually be able to benefit them quite a bit and provide them with strategic guidance about their marketing mix. So one example from recent experience here at Exabeam is that we went through and did a number of interviews with chief security officers and learned that to a person, they listen to podcasts. They listened to them when they were commuting to and from work, when they were on airplanes going to meetings. Obviously, neither of those happening as much, but they were also listening to them when they were going for a run or doing exercise. And so we've made some investments with creating our own podcast and investing in some others as well. The other audience you have is sales and partners. And here, it really comes down to kind of enablement and training. One tip on this topic, and definitely I'm going to try and pepper this conversation here today with lots of tips, is to engage someone from sales to be your partner when you make those presentations. I've definitely seen situations where sales has a bad reaction to marketing coming in and telling them things they should already know about who they should be going in and talking to within their accounts and why. And so, good to have a sales leader or a competent salesperson, an experienced salesperson there alongside you to make those presentations. Another reason why it's good to be the voice of the customer is to capture changes that are taking place in the market. I think all of us are feeling the abrupt change of having to work from home and seeing the impact of that on our customers. In my case, one of the biggest changes is that our customers have really expedited their move to the cloud, and we've had to move quickly to catch up with that aggressive difference transition that they're making. And then finally, you can also not only be, the voice of the customer yourself, you can tap into that voice by using them as a sounding board for new messaging, for new activities that you're looking to do as part of launches or just run rate marketing that you're engaged in. And so this is all important, but there is another reason, and I think it is, at least equal importance, if not more, as a reason for you to engage in a buyer persona program, and that is it allows you to earn a seat at the table. And so not be in that role of supporting product or supporting sales, but to actually have a strategic voice in the conversation. And that's really what I'm trying to illustrate with this photo here. We are the glue between sales and products in product marketing. Sales is the expert at their customers. They have, call it a handful of customers that, they know inside out. They're always ready with an anecdote from the last person that they've talked to influence the positioning of the company, how it's going to market. The product team, no doubt, they are the experts at the product. That's their job. They also typically outnumber us in product marketing. And so they have the ability and the time to get really deep on the product. But no one is the expert at the market, at the buyer personas kind of writ large and the buying process writ large. That's really our job in product marketing. And you have an opportunity to be that expert by creating a buyer persona program. When that salesperson comes up with a anecdote to refute a point of view that you have, a positioning that you're advocating, you, through doing these, having these conversations with the buyer personas, you will have your own anecdotes, your own stories, your own quotes, direct quotes from these folks that you'll be able to use to advocate your position. And that will give you much more credibility than citing a third-party report or advocating a hypothesis based on what you've heard from those salespeople that may be now in a position to argue against you. So that's why you really want to create this buyer persona program. Give yourself a seat at the table, give your career a leg up, make yourself a strategic influencer in your organization. So let's get into the weeds, and then we'll come back to some of the benefits of putting a program like this in place. Here's a quick overview of what the process is. Let me start by saying it really depends on the intake piece of doing some calls. And there are two types of calls that you should be doing. The first is persona calls, and this is reaching out to the folks who are involved in the buying process and understanding who they are. You really want to kind of understand what their responsibilities are and what it takes to do their job. In my experience, you really only need to talk to 6 to 12 folks before you start to see really strong patterns and get a really good understanding of these people. And that's kind of the secret sauce of this program. This is not an exhaustive quantitative study of 100 different people. You're really looking to talk to just enough people to see trends. It may be that 6 calls is not enough. You may have had some calls where people really weren't that forthcoming. You may also have some open questions that are really fundamental that you need to answer by doing additional calls. But a dozen calls should get you through in most cases. Now you're going to ask these folks the same questions. So let's call it a half dozen kind of open-ended questions. The answers you get, you can then synthesize into a worksheet. So if you've asked 6 questions to 6 people, you're going to get the ability to take those 6 answers and combine them for each of those 6 questions. So that's how you build out your kind of persona or the overview of who that person is. The second thing you're going to want to do is understand their buying process. And you do that through the second type of call, which is a win-loss call. And here you're really trying to understand the journey that they're going through. Again, you're going to ask them the same kind of half dozen questions. You'll collate them together into a worksheet. Then you'll take the answers you got from those win-loss calls, from the persona calls, and then you can bring them together to give you kind of that whole picture of who that persona is. You can build that out into slides that you would use for something like sales training or educating the rest of the marketing team. You can build posters or other laminated sheets to remind everybody of who it is that you're looking to speak to as you create positioning, as you go to market as a marketing team. So let me get into a little bit more detail about those 2 steps. So I'm not going to be exhaustive here in terms of going through what these questions are, but as I mentioned, for the personas, they're really kind of high level. What are their responsibilities? What are the metrics that they're being measured against? What are the obstacles they run into as they try and reach those goals and objectives that they've got? You also want to understand who else in their company has influence over the purchase process. So from them, you can start to map out what other personas are involved in the purchase process. You can also ask them, where did they go to get new information? As I mentioned earlier with my example on the chief security officer, it may be that they're listening to podcasts. It may be that they're attending a specific event. It may be that they're talking to their peers or they go to their resellers for information. These are important things for you to know because it's going to influence how you advise the rest of the marketing team to create the marketing mix and at which point in the sales process they should be reaching out, using those different mediums. And then finally, you want to capture anything else of interest that may have come up in the call that you may want to delve into on future calls as well. Persona calls are actually fairly easy to obtain. Here are some of the places where I go to get introduced to these folks. The easiest one is to start with your own marketing database. For example, here at Exabeam, we use Marketo. I know I can go into Marketo and I can find security engineers. If I want to go talk to a dozen security engineers, I'll be able to reach out to them that way. We also have advisory boards. We do user groups. We have a user conference once a year. These are people who are closer to our company, who are clearly leaning in and interested in what we do. These are folks for sure that you can reach out to and have a high likelihood that they want to help you out. Beyond that, LinkedIn is a great resource. You can go and search for different titles. You can also join different LinkedIn groups. So in my case, there are groups for security engineers. There are groups for security architects. We can go there and ask if anybody is willing to talk to us to explain a little bit more about the nature of their job. And finally, when we get back to going to events, you can definitely reach out to folks when you're at a trade show or at one of your own events. And I've given you an example here on the right of kind of a tabletop card that I'll set up with a fishbowl to collect business cards, asking for people to do a call with us in the week or two after the event. And we'll do all this in exchange for a gift card to Starbucks or Amazon, $25 or $50. That's pretty much all it takes to get somebody to sign on and do these calls. Now, moving over to win-loss. Again, here you're looking to understand the journey this person went through. So you want to understand what triggered this buyer to initiate or engage with your company as part of the buying process. You want to understand what their buying criteria were, whether that was specific company relationships, what's your technical support like, what are the features of your product, was it pricing that was really important to them, certain licensing models that you have available. You want to understand also, again, kind of what role other buyers played in this process, who was involved, what their role was, and again, walk through that process and understand where they went and got information, ads, and what information they needed at different points along the way. Of course, this is a win-loss call, so going back up to the top here, you do want to understand what caused you to win or lose that deal, what helped them develop a favorable attitude towards you or an unfavorable attitude. And that'll be really critical, as we'll see, to helping you understand how to reinforce or shift your go-to-market and your positioning in the market. Okay, no lie, these are harder calls to get. So one of the things that I do, as I mentioned, I'm in the B2B space, enterprise here. Typically more than half of our deals are won or lost in the last couple weeks of a quarter. And so what I do is I wait till the end of the quarter, and then I'll reach out to all of the companies where we won or lost and follow up and see if they will engage with us. When we do get these calls, if you have a competitive intelligence team, it may be appropriate for them to take 100% of these calls. If not, just distribute them across your team. You may have assigned persona ownership to different people. So somebody owns, in my case, the chief security officer, somebody might own the engineer, somebody might own the architect. And as you sign people up to do win-loss calls, if you get an engineer, you'll give them to that person who owns the engineer persona. I talked about success rates. So typically with losses, what I've seen over time is you reach out to 20 people, you may get one of them reply to you. Often they're done with you, they've moved on, they don't really feel the need to engage with you. Win calls, better rates of return, right? So you might get 1 out of 4 people, I think is commonly what my teams and I have seen as we engage people on win calls. Don't lose faith. Keep going after those lost calls, though. They tend to be the most valuable calls that you can make. That's where you really learn where your go-to-market is out of sync with what this buyer is looking for. It may be positioning. It may be something your product truly does or doesn't offer, or it may be just how you reached out to them. You may have missed them because you weren't at a certain event. You hadn't provided enough information about your product to a particular industry analyst that they go to rigorously to get opinions about their technology purchases. One tip here is don't leave these too long after a deal has closed. What you'll find is that customers will start to deploy your product, or if it was a loss, they'll be deploying your competitor's product, and they'll start to get overwhelmed with all the issues that are involved in product deployment. And as a result, they're not going to have that granularity about the buying process top of mind anymore, and so the call will be less worthwhile. So definitely don't do this just once a year. Definitely encourage you to reach out to these folks more frequently than that. I've found doing it once a quarter is useful, but your businesses will be different, and you'll find the right cadence. So here's a few other tips, just generally about this process. Let's look at, what you might do kind of before, during, and after these calls. So leading up to them, think about what it is you really want to learn from this person. If you've talked to 4 of their peers and they've outlined what their general responsibilities are, and you're seeing a trend there, focus your time elsewhere. Talk to this next person about what objections or what hurdles they're running into as they try and accomplish their goals. Spend more time trying to understand where they go to get information. On the other hand, if you talk to someone and you find out that they are really knowledgeable about just one aspect of the buying process, maybe it was an engineer who did proof of concept and they've got tons of information they want to share with you about that. Or it was somebody who did an ROI calculator and they looked at different vendors. Spend your time there. Don't worry about having them answer all of your questions. Go really deep on one particular question. That's where you're going to get value from this person. You'll always be able to talk to other people, and you'll be able to get the information from them about the other questions that you have. One other thing, as you're kicking this off, not everybody's comfortable engaging someone in these conversations and taking notes at the same time. So, bring a buddy along with you who can take notes, and you can do the same for them on their calls. The other option you have is to record some of these. I think you'll find that these are crutches that you can get rid of very quickly after a couple calls, but it might be helpful at the beginning as you start this process. Now, during the calls, win-loss calls and persona calls are a little bit different. For the win-loss calls, what I've found works really well is to give them a real softball to start the process. Go along the lines of like, hey, take me back to the moment when you started looking for a solution to your problem. What happened to trigger your search? And what you may find is that's the only question you need to ask, and they're just going to roll for the next half hour. More likely than not, you're going to have to prod them along and ask them where they went and got information, which vendors they looked at, what were the criteria that they placed importance on, and how did they make their final decision. But this is a great way to get that conversation rolling. For persona calls, take off your company filter, right? This isn't about you and your solutions. You want to understand this person, the whole breadth of their responsibilities. Some of those may have no application or no relevance to what it is you're selling, but you really want to know where they're coming from. And that's the place you want to start. Later, as you start to engage and test messaging, you'll be able to really focus on your own solution. But here at the outset, you really want to understand the breadth of who these folks are. And you want to test that every once in a while, because their responsibilities will change over time, as we'll see in one of the examples that I'm going to bring up here momentarily. Capturing quotes. That is another key thing that you should be doing during these calls. The specific words that they're using is something that you can use to repeat the messaging back to them when you start creating your own positioning and messaging. The other thing you want to do is capture quotes to reinforce the changes that you're going to look to have after going through this exercise, right? Those are the proof points that are going to allow you to make change, that are going to allow you to overcome some of the barriers that sales and others are going to set up as you advocate for new positions. And finally, you've asked, as you've gone through the process, you've been asking these folks kind of who else is involved. This is a good time to just simply get the contact information of those other people, and then you can knock out another persona call. I think you'll find that the strategic person who might have led the buying process and the technical person who did the proof of concept have completely different views on vendors, on what the buying process was, and it's really useful to talk to multiple people from the same organization. So you've completed your call. What do you do next? My advice is to quickly write up your notes. Take those notes, write them up, and what I do is I'll book half an hour for the call, and then I'll reserve another 30, 60 minutes afterwards to write my notes up. Not only do details fade quickly from your mind, but studies have shown that it actually takes quite a bit longer to do a write-up the longer you leave it. Even as little as 24 hours can lead to you taking twice as long to write it up. None of us have time. Urgent things can take over your day, and you can miss a lot of the detail as a result. When you're doing that write-up, I would think of yourself as a journalist. I mean, think of yourself as a journalist for this whole process. Like, what's the scoop? What's the headline that came out of that call? What is the most important thing you learned? What were you surprised not to hear? Were there certain expectations you had going in that you didn't hear? I mean, these are the things you want to really highlight when you do your write-up. Then once it's done, don't wait for your entire process of synthesizing all these calls together, creating, cool sales training and marketing assets to be completed. You can go out after a single call and make use of what you learned. You can go to the demand gen team and tell them, hey, there's this content syndication vendor that we should go look into. I've just talked to someone, and that's where they get all of their information. That's the kind of thing that you can jump on right away. So that was the process. Hopefully fairly straightforward. I don't think it's that complicated. It does take work, and it does take persistence. Once you're done though, you can get a lot of benefit from it. So if nothing else, you will have clarified, who the different buyers are that you engage with as you sell your solution in the marketplace. You may also, over time, uncover that there are new buyers that are emerging as you move into different geographies, different customer segments, different size customers, different industry verticals, or there's just some fundamental changes in the market. And that's really what this example here is supposed to show. So I live and breathe, work in the IT space, specifically around cybersecurity. One of the things that traditionally happens in a physical IT environment is that different people own different aspects of IT. So you'll have a storage admin, you'll have a network admin, a security admin, etc. And they are often responsible for the buying process for their discrete solutions. Well, along came virtual machines. And what happened was the vSphere admin, the person who was responsible for running those, also ended up with responsibility for the storage, for the security, for backup, for all of the network connections for those devices and for those workloads. And they had the budget for that. And so, through our persona work, we realized that we had two discrete buyers now. If we look at security, we had a security engineer on one hand, and then we had our vSphere admin on the other. And what we ended up doing was building discrete messaging for them. We also interviewed them and found out that they were reading, different publications. They were going to different websites. They were also going to different trade shows and different events because of where the vendors that they worked with were going. And so, their attention was split. And as a result of us kind of bifurcating our go-to-market, we were actually able to accelerate the creation of opportunities for the company and to improve our win rates as well. So a lot of benefit here to identifying these new buyers that might come into your space. Today, virtual environments are pretty established, but I'm seeing a similar trend happening around the cloud. So as we run into folks who own responsibility for administering AWS, GCP, Azure environments, these folks often own a broad budget for things like security and some of the other things you see here. So this is an ongoing activity. You can't just do your buyer persona interviews once and then forget about it. You need to keep up with the trends in the marketplace. For sure, there's some changes taking place with people working from home right now, as I talked about earlier. All right, here's another example about launch positioning. So often, product is kind of upstream. They've been thinking about what the user needs are as they've been building out the product. And one of the things that you can do with your buyer persona work is validate or refute that internal thinking. So here's an example of a project that my team had. We were looking to talk to SharePoint admins about archiving their data. So keeping their data for long periods of time. We worked with a product manager. He'd been a SharePoint archiving product manager for 4 years. And we asked him, we said, hey, what value should we bring to these customers? And he came back and said, tell them that we're going to reduce their storage. Let's build a campaign around reducing their storage costs. We went out and we talked to 12 folks. They were either SharePoint admins or architects. And consistently they came back to us and they said, a couple of years ago, we would have been interested in talking to you about storage costs. Storage is so cheap right now, it's just not material. What we're really interested in is the governance of that data. There's so many new regulations, including a whole bunch of regulations that have to do with privacy. And that's really what we need to understand. When can we delete data? How long do we need to retain it? Talk to us about the value you provide there. And that's what we did. And we ended up identifying, close to 1,000 new opportunities for the company based on this campaign using this messaging. So it really can pay off to go through the effort and get your messaging correct. Another way that you can use this buyer persona work is to create sales plays that map to your personas. Now, part of that is just simply going through, asking them what's important to them, what initiatives they're working on, and then creating messaging that ties to that. Product Marketing 101, I know. Here's an example of some of our recent sales plays around modernization, identifying insider threats within companies, moving security to the cloud, and then looking at IoT and other devices and making sure that they're secured. So helping us understand how to prioritize different messages in the market was the first piece. And then understanding who it is we need to engage and how at different steps in that buying process was the next component. So you can see here, for example, for 3 of these plays, Lakshmi, our security leader, is our primary sponsor that we wanted to reach out to. But in one of our plays, which really targets kind of the mid-market, companies that have less than 2,000 employees, we're focused on Steve. This is a guy who may have responsibility for security, but that's not his primary job. He may be the CIO in this small company and have a team of 2 people. He's got very different interests than Lakshmi, whose whole life is all about security and deals with a much more sophisticated team and has many more resources at her fingertips. And you can see the buyers and the influencers and the users also change depending on what those plays are. I do want to end by talking about those users. And my final kind of word of advice here is to align with the product team on your personas. Hopefully there's somebody over there, in product design or engineering or product management or program management who's taken the initiative to create user personas so that they know who they are building their product for. You should be working with them to make sure that you have a common language when it comes to talking about who your buyers are. As you saw a moment ago, we have Esteban, the engineer. He's involved in the purchase process, but he's also a user after the fact. We want to make sure that he has a seamless experience as he's working with our company, going through the buying process, using the product, and then when it comes time to renewal, there's no surprises. He's had one view of who we are, one interaction, kind of seamless interaction over time with our company. And you can see here that we've mapped the involvement of different people to the different stages in that relationship, and then also called out who the different organizations, whether that's marketing or sales engineering team or our customer success team, that are interacting with them at this different points in the process. So that's it for my presentation. Thanks very much for your time. What I've tried to get across to you today is the value of going through this exercise. It really does give you a seat at the table, gives you credibility in the organization. The process for getting there can be pretty straightforward. My pleasure to share kind of the process that I've used over time, and hopefully some of the examples of the impact that that's had on on the organizations where I've worked have resonated with you and given you some ideas about how you be able to do the same for your companies. Here's my LinkedIn address if you want to get a hold of me. I'd be happy to connect. Thank you very much again. Can address some of them now. Madeline asked me a couple questions here I can see in the chat. Feel free to keep adding to it as you guys have them here. So some questions here about providing people with incentives. So who do you engage in win-loss calls? Is it junior people, senior people? Really, for win-loss calls, take whoever you can get. These are harder calls to line up. I think the person you really want to talk to is the person who led the buying process on their end. In my case, where we're selling to larger enterprises, it's typically kind of someone who sits in the middle of the organization, who has a balance of both kind of business acumen and technology knowledge. And they're a great person to start with. They're probably the person that's registered like within your Salesforce instance or whatever CRM that you're using that's tied to that deal. I also wouldn't stop there though. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is that it really benefits you to talk to multiple people within the same organization who've gone through a buying process. So it might be that this person who's championed the deal is has kind of kicked it off, but they've had to go to their boss, who I've defined as like the sponsor in a persona. And this is really kind of the economic buyer. This is the person who holds the purse strings, who might have the budget, who's got to have the final approval. They'll look to your primary buyer to provide them with a recommendation or with some a point of view about what the company should do, but ultimately, they're the sponsor's the final decision maker, and so getting them involved. They may only appear at the very beginning or the very end of your selling process, but understanding kind of what their criteria are. What was the criteria that they sent their staff on. In terms of finding a solution, what helped them make a decision at the end of the day are interesting things. Likewise, you might have a technical buyer or a user that you want to engage as well. They may be involved in trying out your product, either through a free trial or some other pilot that they're able to engage in, and they can tell you about that experience. So really, again, coming back to it, talk to as many people as you can. I think that'll really give you some color about what the whole process entailed. Also, you saw in my case, we have about, I'm just trying to think of the number here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 personas, 8 actually, and we want to understand what role they all play in the buying process. So we get that by talking to someone and asking who else was involved, but also having calls with each of those types of personas is really useful as well, to hear it directly from them about what role they played and where in the process they were engaged. A couple questions here around incentives that we provide people. So yeah, we're in a virtual world right now. It's pretty easy to send folks an online coupon to a retailer, or typically we've done things like Starbucks or Amazon. Another one that we've done is identify either one or a handful of charities, and people can, in exchange for the call, we can contribute to that charity on their behalf. Typically with the more senior folks, $25 isn't going to move the needle for them. So they're more excited about making sure that goes to a charity that kind of lines up with, one of their one of their interests. And so I think that's another great way, especially at a time like this where there are so many issues, COVID not being the least of them, that need to get addressed out there. People are quite happy to go and get engaged. Let me take a look at some other questions here. The question about the template to capture the persona details. So as I mentioned earlier, what the kind of half dozen questions that we're asking for a persona interview are different than the half dozen questions we're asking for win-loss. And what we'll do is use that as a place to fill in all of the answers, and then we'll synthesize those together into a document that's kind of got those questions and the answers to them brought together. One of the other pieces in that document is kind of biographical information. So we'll try and understand kind of what the education level or type of education that people had. We'll look at how old they are, and we might, you have to kind of figure that out, through your call, just by, the way that they talk. You can look at their LinkedIn profile. That's often a good tool. And they'll have the dates in there, when their career started, so you can kind of do the math yourself. And so you get some biographical information. And then the third piece is really the details that they provide on the different places that they've gone to get information. So what I'll typically do is talk to somebody and they'll say, hey, I'll go to events, and then have a place where you record the different type of events that they went to. In my case, it might be like, hey, they went to an RSA security event. They went to the Google event to get information. It might be do they listen to podcasts? Okay, which podcasts they listen to, and you'll start recording those. And then again, when you bring that information together to synthesize and who the broader persona is, you can see how many people mentioned a specific podcast or a specific event, and then you can stack rank those so that when you provide that information to the demand gen team or your peers over on corporate marketing who are looking to reach out through different publications in press, or identify different analysts that these folks talk to, or even different channel partners that they go to for advice, you've got them all prioritized based on the number of times that a particular vendor came up in your conversations. So those are really the three parts to that intake doc. And then you can organize it whichever way you want when it comes to putting them into slides. I've also seen people create posters for their office where they have a picture of that buyer to remind everybody that that's who you're talking to. And then it really depends what level of information you want to put there. Sometimes I've seen people just put a quote. Other times they've included much more information about kind of what that person's priorities are, or what role or where they appear in the buying process as well. Okay, carrying on here, how long did this initiative take? So I would say, to set it up, you're going to have to do these 6 to 12 calls for each of the personas, and you may learn that there are new personas out there, or that you have identified multiple personas who are actually play the same role in the buying process. So they're actually, you can treat them as one. So there's going to be some learning that happens as you kind of map out what a typical or hypothetical org structure might be for your personas. So 1 or 2 quarters is typically what it takes to get it set up. It does depend a bit on how many people you have on your team and how successful you are at getting people on the phone. But I would say when I've set these up, folks are doing 1 or 2 calls a week. And so you can actually get it done fairly quickly to map out who the personas are. Then the win-loss calls, it'll depend on your business and how many, kind of how many calls you actually, or how many deals you actually go through in a given period of time. So if you're like us and focused up at the top of of the pyramid there, we have few but larger deals. Folks who are operating down the small business level, you might have thousands of deals that come across in a quarter. And so you have lots of opportunity to do win-loss calls. But yeah, months, not years, to get this done. And then I think you don't want to let it go stagnant. So carrying on calls on an ongoing basis, I think, is important. Like I said, I do win-loss calls at the end of each quarter, have my team engage in that. And then as you have a big launch, or if there's something that's changed in your marketplace, you know, one of your competitors has come out with something new, or the market has changed. Everybody started working from home, for example. You might want to go and do a kind of an in-depth interview with folks about some new messaging that you have. Or if you're about to embark on a new channel, you want to kick off an ABM program, or you want to start reaching out to people through social media, then going and setting up a bunch of persona calls and talking to them and getting their feedback on your messaging, as my team did with the SharePoint archiving example that I went through here. You know, that's worth doing as well. And again, because most of those involve persona calls, not win-loss calls, you should be able to knock those out in a month or two as you lead up to your launch, to get that messaging right, to validate the approach that you're taking. So hopefully that helps in terms of how long it takes, but it does depend a little bit on how many people you have on your team. I definitely try and identify someone on the team to take primary ownership of the different personas. And if you have a big enough team, then you can have other people support them and do some interviews alongside them. All right, scrolling through here. Let me see what I've got. Gift cards for streaming services sound like a great idea to me. Can't get enough of Netflix these days. And I think we're all looking forward to some of the new things coming out on Disney Plus in the next couple months. All right, Madeline's got another question for me here. Let me just read it. Okay, so yeah, not surprised. A question here about how we're dealing with the fact that we're not able to get to physical events to find people to do these persona calls. So how are we engaging people in at a time here where we're all working remotely? LinkedIn definitely is your friend. Direct messages to folks, you can, you know, put their titles in. If like, so we have a security leader persona. Often their title is Chief Information Security Officer or Chief Security Officer. It might be VP of Information Security. So, you know, we'll do a LinkedIn search looking for those folks. There's also LinkedIn groups. So I can tell you that there are LinkedIn groups for security leaders, and we'll go in there and say, you know, full disclosure, you know, I'm a vendor looking to research the market. You know, is anybody there kind of available to interested to help me out? I'll, you know, happy to donate $50 to you know, to one of these three charities if you'll take a call with me and you know, a 20-minute call, and we can, you know, learn a bit more about what your job is. So I think that that's a really good way to go. Definitely hitting your own database. You know, Marketo or whatever it is that you're using, Salesforce is also good. I think, you know, industry organizations might be another way to go. So often there are kind of communities set up. So if someone's looking to market to us, the product marketers, they might find an organization like the Product Marketing Alliance here and find a way to use that to reach out to us as well. You know, that can be another way to get a hold of folks. Your field, you know, your salespeople are all out talking to these personas as well, and so that can be helpful. I would definitely, you know, use things like LinkedIn to get beyond your customers. Though you definitely want to be talking to people who don't know about you, who may have other priorities than what you've been messaging as a company, and so they've gone and found other solutions out there. and get them involved as well. You may learn that there is a segment of the market that you've been missing, kind of like the project where I was talking about all of these virtual machine admins, or today it may be cloud admins. And if you are just focused on the kind of the traditional on-premise folks, you may miss this whole segment that's out there. So fortunately, we were able to catch that at the time, and then go and deliberately look for them. But our salespeople wouldn't have engaged them at that point because it was a whole segment of buyers that we hadn't tapped into yet. So hopefully those are some ideas that are helpful. I think that's it for questions that are coming in. We'll definitely give you another minute here if there's something on your mind. But otherwise, thanks for the questions. They were great.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for a great presentation, and also thanks for taking the time to answer all those questions as well. And thank you to everyone who asked questions and tuned in. And with that, I think we'll finish up. A lot of love for you in the chat, Trevor, but no more questions. So I hope to speak to you soon and see everyone else soon as well.
Great. Thanks again.